In the midst of the endless cosmic ocean, the Galactic Academy for Advanced Combat Training unfurled a challenge that would forever redefine the boundaries of physical and mental endurance. The atmosphere in the grand atrium was electric with anticipation, as holographic displays projected swirling images of distant galaxies and enigmatic nebulae that served as a foretaste of the unknown perils awaiting the cadets on an unexplored moon. A multitude of species, each distinguished by unique physiologies and exotic cultures, gathered for the inaugural gravity challenge. The challenge was designed not only to test their ability to navigate an environment with erratic gravitational fluctuations, but also to push their ingenuity and adaptability to unprecedented levels. Amid this congregation of cosmic warriors, the presence of the human contingent sparked a mix of curiosity and skepticism among the alien cadets. While the alien instructors had meticulously prepared complex simulations and advanced analytical tools to decode the gravitational puzzles, the human delegation, composed of individuals whose reputation for ingenuity preceded them, was assigned the same daunting task, with little modification to the rules. The moon selected for the trial was an imposing sphere, its surface marked by jagged ridges, deep craters, and expansive plains that shifted between intense gravitational pull and near weightlessness in unpredictable cycles. As the briefing commenced, the Academy's chief instructor, a stern, luminescent being with multiple shimmering eyes, addressed the assembly in a resonant tone that commanded respect. He explained that the gravitational anomalies on the moon would change at random intervals, disorienting those who relied solely on predetermined algorithms and conventional strategies. Instead, the challenge demanded an intimate understanding of physics, an intuitive sense of timing, and a willingness to embrace the unexpected. In the background, the human commander, a seasoned veteran of numerous interstellar expeditions, listened intently as he surveyed the gathered cadets. His eyes, filled with determination and an unmistakable glimmer of confidence, spoke of countless experiences where instinct triumphed over rigorous calculation. He recalled the moments when his intuition had led him through uncharted territories, and he knew that his team possessed a spirit that could not be confined by the rigid structures of conventional training. As the session drew to a close, the human commander exchanged a knowing glance with his second-in-command, a brilliant and resourceful engineer whose calm demeanor under pressure had earned her accolades in past missions. She was known for her ability to convert even the most daunting challenges into opportunities for innovation. Her thoughtful expression hinted at plans already formulating in her mind. She envisaged a strategy that combined precise observations with rapid, adaptive movements, effectively turning the unpredictable environment into an ally rather than an adversary. With the final words of the briefing echoing in the vast hall, the cadets were transported via a state-of-the-art teleportation system to the surface of the moon. The transition from the controlled environment of the Academy to the raw, untamed wilderness of the lunar terrain was jarring. As the human delegation materialized on the rocky surface, the stark reality of the challenge hit them like a tidal wave. The ground beneath their feet, uneven and unstable, reminded them that this was no simulation but a test of survival in an alien world. In the distance, the silhouettes of alien cadets could be seen as they cautiously began to acclimate to the shifting gravity. The human commander, his mind racing with both excitement and determination, took a moment to absorb the surreal landscape. Every rock, every crevice, every ripple in the surface held the potential for both peril and discovery. He recalled the countless stories of explorers who had faced nature's fury on Earth, yet nothing in those tales compared to the challenge that lay before him on this distant satellite. Meanwhile, the human engineer, ever observant, immediately began to map the subtle cues of the gravitational shifts by examining the way loose pebbles danced in the air, and how shadows elongated and contracted with every gravitational pull. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, betrayed the silent determination that drove her to decode the mysteries of this hostile environment. As minutes turned into hours, the initial excitement gave way to the realization that every moment on the moon demanded absolute concentration. The human commander set forth, leading his small team with a confidence that was born of years of experience under extreme conditions. His every step was measured and purposeful. His mind continuously processed the interplay of forces that defined the alien world. Despite the heavy burden of responsibility, he allowed himself a brief moment of wonder at the beauty of the surreal landscape, a beauty that was as deceptive as it was mesmerizing. Back at the academy, the alien instructors observed the progress of all participants through advanced monitoring systems. The sensors captured every nuance, the hesitant, calculated movements of the alien cadets who relied on intricate, pre-planned sequences, and the fluid, instinctive motions of the human team, who appeared to move with an organic understanding of the moon's capricious nature. The chief instructor, whose analytical mind was trained to recognize even the smallest deviation from predicted behavior, noted that the humans exhibited a remarkable ability to improvise in the face of uncertainty. He found himself both impressed and perplexed by the human approach, which seemed to defy the conventional wisdom that governed intergalactic combat training. The human commander, aware of the silent scrutiny, allowed his team to work with an unspoken synergy. Every time the gravity shifted unexpectedly, he relied on his instincts to guide him, while his engineer meticulously adjusted the makeshift instruments that measured the gravitational fluctuations. His leadership was not marked by grand proclamations, but by subtle gestures and decisive actions that instilled confidence in his comrades. He recognized that the challenge was as much about understanding oneself as it was about conquering an external force. In the midst of the chaos, he recalled lessons from past missions where every instinct had proven invaluable. The shifting gravity was like a living, breathing entity, one that could either hinder progress or propel one to new heights. With each unexpected change, the human commander and his engineer demonstrated that adaptability and perseverance were the true measures of strength. The commander's heart pounded with the rhythm of the pulsating lunar surface, and in that moment, he felt an unbreakable bond with the harsh environment. The alien cadets, though numerous and advanced in their own right, found themselves ensnared in a web of calculations and delays. Their movements, though precise, lacked the spontaneous fluidity that the human delegation exhibited. As the challenge unfolded, the human team gradually carved a path through the treacherous terrain, leaving behind a trail of ingenuity and courage that defied conventional training methods. The commander's mind raced with possibilities and theories, and he quickly deduced that the seemingly erratic gravitational patterns were not random, but followed subtle natural laws that could be discerned by those who observed keenly. This insight marked the beginning of a revolutionary approach to interstellar navigation and combat, one that would challenge established doctrines across galaxies. In those initial moments on the alien moon, the human delegation set in motion a chain of events that promised to alter the course of galactic history. Their bold approach, marked by intuitive leaps and a fearless embrace of uncertainty, hinted at a future where innovation triumphed over rigid tradition. As the sun of a distant star dipped below the horizon of the barren landscape, casting long, surreal shadows over the moon's surface, the human commander paused to reflect on the enormity of the challenge before him. The moon, with its unpredictable gravitational dance, was not merely a testing ground, but a canvas upon which the future of intergalactic relations would be painted. In that silent moment of introspection, he understood that the true challenge was not just to navigate the physical terrain, but also to bridge the vast chasm between conventional thought and the boundless potential of human ingenuity. The experience of that first day, fraught with both peril and promise, would soon become the cornerstone of a new era in cosmic exploration, where every gravity-defying leap carried the weight of hope, determination, and the unyielding spirit of discovery. The human commander pressed forward, his boots making contact with the unstable ground beneath him. The gravity continued to fluctuate, shifting between oppressive weight and near weightlessness. Every step required recalibration, every movement an assessment of forces beyond his control. His muscles tensed as a new shift occurred, pulling him downward with an intensity that threatened to lock his limbs in place. He adjusted quickly, bending his knees and distributing his weight evenly to avoid losing balance. Around him, the human cadets were doing the same, each finding their own way to counter the moon's unpredictable pull. The engineer moved with precision, her mind working through the calculations faster than the instruments she carried. She had stopped relying on the Academy-issued equipment, recognizing its limitations within the first hour of the trial. Instead, she observed the environment directly, measuring gravity's effect through objects in motion. A small pebble rolling down an incline at an accelerated speed told her more than the Academy's predictive models ever could. She had begun marking patterns in the fluctuations, identifying a rhythm within the chaos. It wasn't perfectly predictable, but it was enough to allow her a degree of control. The alien cadets struggled. Their training had prepared them for extreme conditions, but not for the erratic and volatile nature of this moon's gravitational shifts. Some had equipped themselves with exoskeletal support frames meant to compensate for sudden increases in force, but those devices proved unreliable. The frames took too long to adjust, causing delays in movement. Those who relied on agility found themselves at an even greater disadvantage. Their jumps, calculated with mathematical precision, often sent them too far or not far enough. Many landed awkwardly, their bodies unable to recover from miscalculated distances. The human commander watched as one of the alien cadets, a tall reptilian humanoid, attempted to leap over a crater. The gravity shifted mid-air, pulling him down abruptly. His body twisted as he lost control, his trajectory collapsing. The commander reacted instantly, his instincts overriding thought. He lunged forward, extending his arms to catch the falling cadet. The impact sent a jolt through his legs, but he held his ground, stabilizing both himself and the reptilian cadet. The alien's golden eyes widened in surprise as he processed what had just happened. The commander released his grip and nodded before continuing forward. There was no time for hesitation. The trial was not just about survival. It was about learning how to move efficiently through an environment designed to challenge every assumption about physics and motion. The engineer had stopped again. She crouched near a rock formation, tracing her fingers along its surface. The way the dust settled around the base indicated something she had begun to suspect. The gravitational shifts were not random. They followed a pattern, though not one easily discernible at first glance. She reached for her datapad, hesitating for a moment before discarding it back into her pack. The numbers weren't going to help her now. She needed to feel it, to understand it in a way no device could replicate. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she pushed herself upward, leaping into the air just as the gravity lessened. For a brief moment, she was suspended in motion, weightless and free. Then, just as she predicted, the force pulled her down again, but she landed precisely where she intended. A grin spread across her face. She had it. The commander noticed. He approached as she turned, her expression one of realization. He didn't need her to explain. He could see it in the way she moved. She had deciphered the moon's rhythm. The rest of the human cadets had started to follow her example. Instead of fighting against the shifts, they adapted, learning when to push forward and when to allow the moon's pull to do the work for them. The alien cadets, still struggling with rigid calculations, watched in disbelief. The humans were not just surviving the trial, they were thriving, the chief instructor observed from the Academy's monitoring station. His multiple eyes focused on the human movements, analyzing every action with meticulous precision. What he saw defied expectations. The humans weren't just reacting to the environment. They were interacting with it in ways that suggested a deeper understanding, one that surpassed technological dependency. His assistant, a veteran instructor of galactic combat, turned to him. "They aren't following the expected models," he noted, his voice laced with disbelief. The chief instructor did not respond immediately. Instead, he continued watching as the human commander led his team across the unstable landscape with an ease that should have been impossible. Then, finally, he spoke. "No," he said, "they are not." The human commander advanced further across the unstable terrain, his movements precise and measured. He no longer needed to constantly analyze the shifting gravitation. His instincts had fully adjusted. Each step became an unconscious calculation, his body reacting before his mind could even process the change. His confidence grew with every motion, and as he glanced back, he saw his team following with the same newfound ease. They had adapted. The moon no longer dictated their movements. They controlled their own momentum. The engineer was ahead, scanning the horizon with sharp focus. She had deciphered the gravity's rhythm, but now she was looking for something else. The trial was not just about endurance, it was also about progress. She knew there would be an endpoint, a final objective they had yet to reach. As she studied the landscape, she noticed something in the distance. A structure, faint against the shifting dust, stood tall among the jagged rock formations. It was their destination. She turned to signal the commander, but before she could call out, a sudden tremor shook the ground beneath her. The moon's surface quivered violently, and she barely had time to react before a gravitational shift far stronger than any before it pulled her downward with crushing force. Her knees buckled as she hit the ground, pain shooting through her limbs. She clenched her jaw, trying to push herself up, but the force held her down. The commander's head snapped toward her the moment she fell. His instincts screamed at him this shift was different. It wasn't just another fluctuation in the moon's pattern. Something had changed. He sprinted toward her, fighting against the same oppressive force. Every step felt like he was dragging his body through thick, unyielding sludge. But he didn't stop. Reaching her, he dropped to one knee and gripped her arm, pulling with all his strength. She gritted her teeth, struggling against the pull, but it was as if an invisible hand was pressing her into the surface. The alien cadets had also been affected. Several collapsed under the increased pressure, their exosuits malfunctioning in the overwhelming gravitational force. Panic spread among them. Their calculations had failed them, their preparations rendered useless in the face of something unpredictable. They looked to their instructors through their communication links, but no response came. The Academy's monitors were still tracking them, but no guidance was being offered. This wasn't a test anymore. This was a real survival scenario. The chief instructor watched from the control station, his expression unreadable. His assistant turned to him with barely concealed alarm. "This isn't part of the scheduled fluctuations. The gravity has increased beyond the projected parameters." The chief instructor remained silent for a moment before speaking. "The humans are still moving." The assistant turned back to the screen, his gaze snapping to the commander and his engineer. While the alien cadets were trapped, the humans were still resisting. The commander had managed to pull the engineer up just enough for her to regain her footing, but she was visibly struggling. Her breath came in short bursts, sweat dripping down her forehead as she fought against the invisible weight pressing down on her. The commander scanned their surroundings, his mind racing for a solution. He couldn't simply force his way through this one. The gravitational field was too strong. His eyes flicked to the landscape, searching for anything that could help. Then he saw it. The loose rocks around them weren't just being pressed into the ground. Some were shifting ever so slightly, almost as if the force wasn't completely uniform. The engineer followed his gaze and understood immediately. The gravitational surge wasn't an all-encompassing effect. It had weak points, areas where the force wasn't as strong. If they could move between those points, they might be able to escape the worst of it. She took a deep breath, forced herself to move, and staggered forward. The moment she stepped into one of the weaker zones, the pressure eased slightly. The commander wasted no time. "Move through the gaps," he ordered, his voice sharp. The other human cadets responded instantly, watching where he and the engineer stepped, adjusting their own paths to follow. The alien cadets, still struggling, looked on in disbelief. One of them, a feline-like humanoid, attempted to replicate the human's movement. He pushed forward, stumbling as he crossed into a weaker zone. The relief was immediate. He called out in his own language to his comrades, urging them to copy the human strategy. Slowly, some of them began to move, hesitant but determined. The chief instructor observed it all. His assistant turned to him once more, his voice tinged with something close to awe. "They're leading the others." The chief instructor nodded. "They see beyond the calculations. That is what makes them different." The humans continued forward, each step more confident than the last. The structure ahead became clearer, and with it, the realization that the hardest part of the challenge was yet to come. The commander pressed forward, his body moving with an efficiency that had come from hours of adapting to the moon's volatile gravity. Every muscle in his legs burned, but he ignored it, keeping his focus locked on the structure ahead. The engineer was beside him, her breaths controlled despite the exhaustion evident in her every movement. The gravitational surges were still unpredictable, but they had found a rhythm, one that allowed them to move without being overwhelmed. The alien cadets, now following their lead, had begun to adapt as well, though not with the same fluidity. Their hesitation was evident, their reliance on calculation still holding them back from fully embracing instinct. The structure loomed closer, its towering form rising from the uneven terrain. It was no natural formation. The design was sleek, its metallic surface reflecting the dim light from the distant sun. There were no visible entrances from this angle, and the commander suspected the real challenge lay not in reaching it, but in figuring out how to gain access. He slowed his pace, raising a hand to signal the others to stop. The engineer took the moment to observe their surroundings, her eyes scanning every detail. The ground near the base of the structure was different, smoother, as if something had been artificially altered. She crouched, pressing her palm against the surface. It was solid, but not natural rock. It was a platform. She looked up at the commander, nodding toward the structure. "It's meant to be activated," she said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. The alien cadets, overhearing her, exchanged wary glances. Their technology was advanced, but their methods relied heavily on systems they understood. If this was an unknown mechanism, it meant uncertainty, and uncertainty was something they feared more than failure. The feline-like cadet, the one who had first followed the human's example, took a cautious step forward. The commander didn't wait. He placed his foot on the platform, applying pressure. Nothing happened. He stepped back, narrowing his eyes as he considered the possibilities. The gravity fluctuations had been part of the challenge. Was this structure linked to them? The engineer was already ahead of him, adjusting her thinking. She reached into her pack, pulling out a small multi-tool. Without hesitation, she pressed it against the surface, running a scan. The device flickered, struggling to process the data. The readings were erratic, much like the moon's gravity. Then the platform shifted. A low hum reverberated through the ground, and the structure came to life. Lights flickered along its surface, patterns forming in intricate sequences. The alien cadets tensed, their instincts telling them to retreat, but the commander stood firm. He felt the gravity shift again, but this time it wasn't random. It was being controlled. The engineer's eyes widened as she watched the readings on her device change rapidly. "It's responding to the gravitational shifts," she said. "It's using them as a key." The realization clicked into place. The entire trial had been leading to this moment. The unpredictable gravity was not an obstacle. It was the mechanism by which the structure functioned. The commander took a step back, assessing the situation. If the gravity fluctuations controlled access, then the key to opening the entrance was not brute force or technology, it was movement. He turned to the others. "We need to synchronize with the shifts," he said. "Move with them, not against them." The alien cadets hesitated. Their instincts screamed against such an approach. Relying on something they could not mathematically predict was against everything they had been taught. But they had seen the humans succeed where they had failed. The engineer took the lead. She studied the pattern of the gravity surges, then took a deep breath before stepping onto the platform. She moved with precision, shifting her weight at just the right moment. The structure responded. The lights pulsed brighter, and a faint vibration coursed through the platform. The commander followed, matching his movements to the rhythm of the gravity. One by one, the human cadets did the same. The feline-like cadet gritted his teeth before stepping forward, his muscles tense as he tried to mimic their movements. The others followed, some less gracefully than others, but all understanding that this was the only way forward. As the final cadet stepped onto the platform, the structure emitted a deep, resonant sound. The surface beneath them shifted, and then, with a slow, deliberate motion, an entrance revealed itself. The commander exhaled, his muscles still coiled with tension. The trial was not over. If anything, it had only just begun. The entrance yawned open before them, revealing a dimly lit corridor lined with sleek metallic walls. The faint hum of energy pulsed through the air, emanating from unseen mechanisms embedded deep within the structure. The commander stepped forward first, his senses alert. The engineer followed closely behind, her eyes scanning every surface, every detail. The alien cadets hesitated at the threshold, but the feline-like one took the first step inside, his movements cautious but resolute. The others followed in silence. The moment the last of them entered, the entrance sealed shut behind them with a deep, resonant clang. The shift in pressure was immediate. The gravity inside the structure stabilized, no longer fluctuating unpredictably. The oppressive force that had made every movement a struggle outside was now gone. It was as if they had stepped into a completely different environment, one untouched by the chaos of the moon's surface. The commander tightened his grip on his gear. The stillness inside the structure was unsettling. There were no visible doors, no obvious pathways, only the long corridor stretching ahead into darkness. He moved forward, his footsteps echoing softly against the metallic floor. The engineer walked beside him, keeping her eyes on her scanner. The readings were fluctuating, shifting between incomprehensible data and complete blankness. Then the corridor came to life. A series of lights flickered on along the walls, illuminating intricate patterns of alien script. The air vibrated with energy as the floor beneath them shimmered, transforming into a display of interconnected pathways. A voice, deep, resonant, and unfamiliar, reverberated through the chamber. It was not in any known galactic language, yet its meaning was clear, transmitted directly into their minds. Final trial initiated. The commander exchanged a glance with the engineer. This was never just a test of endurance. There was something more at play, something designed to evaluate not just physical strength, but comprehension, adaptability, and intent. The gravity outside had been the first test. This was the final one. A section of the floor ahead of them dissolved into a shifting, transparent field, revealing a vast drop into what seemed like an endless void. A series of floating platforms materialized in the air, each pulsing with energy. Some were stationary, others moved in unpredictable patterns. The commander's mind worked quickly. This was another test of movement, but unlike the fluctuating gravity outside, this required absolute precision. The engineer took a step forward, analyzing the rhythm of the platforms. "It's a sequence," she murmured, her voice steady. "They follow a pattern, but it's not just about timing. It's about weight distribution, trajectory, and acceleration." The alien cadets hesitated once more. Their minds were still conditioned to rely on calculations, but as the commander had already proven, there was no time for hesitation in environments like this. He crouched slightly, adjusting his balance, then leaped onto the first platform. It held firm beneath him, humming softly under his weight. The engineer followed, her movements just as precise. The feline-like cadet inhaled sharply before pushing off the ledge. He landed slightly off balance but adjusted quickly, his claws gripping the surface. The others followed, some with difficulty, but all managed to find their footing. Then the platforms shifted. A surge of energy rippled through the air, and the floating platforms began to rotate, tilt, and drift apart. The commander reacted instantly, calculating his next move mid-air as he jumped to the next platform. His team followed, their movements instinctive, their bodies adapting in real time to the erratic changes. The alien cadets struggled, but the feline-like one had begun to trust his instincts. He moved fluidly, relying less on precise calculations and more on sensory adjustments. The engineer nearly lost her footing as a platform beneath her tilted unexpectedly. The commander caught her wrist, steadying her before she could slip. She exhaled sharply, nodding her thanks before refocusing on the path ahead. The voice returned, its tone shifting subtly, as if assessing their performance. Observation, adaptability exceeds expectation. The platform stabilized, forming a direct path to the far end of the chamber. The final section of the trial was upon them. A doorway materialized at the end of the corridor, its surface rippling like liquid metal. The commander approached first, but before he could step through, the voice spoke one last time. Final verification, intent. The doorway pulsed, and suddenly images flickered to life in the air before them. Projections of battles, of civilizations in turmoil, of advanced technologies used for destruction. It was a history of war, of conquest, of dominance. Echoes of the past embedded into this ancient structure. The commander's jaw tightened. He recognized what this was, a test not of skill but of purpose. The engineer's voice was quiet but firm. It's asking why we're here. The alien cadets stiffened. Their species had histories filled with war, expansion, and territorial claims. They had trained for battle, for dominance in the galactic hierarchy. But the humans? Humans had proven something else entirely. They had not conquered this trial through superior strength or technology. They had adapted. They had led. They had helped even those who had once doubted them. The feline-like cadet stepped forward. His voice was steady, no longer filled with uncertainty. We came to learn. The doorway shimmered. The voice spoke one final time. Assessment complete. The entrance dissolved, revealing the outside once more. The gravity beyond remained stable, as if the moon itself had changed in response to their passage. The commander exhaled, stepping through first. The others followed. As the last of them crossed, the structure behind them vanished, dissolving into the air as if it had never been there. The chief instructor watched from the control station, his expression unreadable. His assistant turned to him, his voice quiet with realization. They weren't just being tested. They were being judged. The chief instructor nodded, and they passed. The trial was over, but its impact would ripple far beyond this moon. The humans had proven what no calculation could predict, that true strength lay not in control but in adaptation, in unity, in the ability to move beyond instinct and into understanding. As the commander and his team boarded the transport that would take them back to the academy, he looked out at the vast expanse of space. This was not the end. This was only the beginning.